What's up guys, Ivan Carranza here and welcome to Bass Tone Tuesday. Today we're gonna be talking about EQ, and this is gonna be a multiple part series focused on how to use EQ more effectively on the bass guitar. And for this we're gonna be comparing different frequencies, we're gonna be taking a look at different types of EQ and also comparing different pedals and sounds, how each manufacturer sets the EQ on their products. But today we're going to be focusing on the types of EQ that are out there. To make things a bit more comprehensible, we have to explain a few things first. And the first is that our ears pick up sounds ranging from 20 Hz up until 20,000 Hz or 20 kilohertz. And we've evolved to be able to hear the human voice pretty accurately. And the human voice resides in the mid-range. That is very important to keep in mind. The second thing is the gain. And we're talking about it in relationship to the frequency and the EQ. You can think of it as the volume or the loudness of a certain frequency. If you raise the gain, you're raising the volume of a certain frequency. If you lower the gain, you're lowering the volume or the loudness of a certain frequency. The third thing is the Q. And you can think of that as the shape of the EQ move that you're going to be doing. A very broad Q is going to look kind of like a mountain, and a very narrow Q is going to be very sharp, kind of like a peak. A narrow Q is only going to affect a very short range of frequencies, and a broad Q is going to affect the center frequency and pretty much everything around it as well. And the last thing is the frequency. That is going to dictate which point across the whole frequency spectrum that we covered before, from 20 to 20,000 Hz, you're going to be raising or lowering in volume. And different points across that whole spectrum have a different effect on our ears. The first type of EQ that we're going to be taking a look at is the fully parametric EQ. And they allow you to control the Q, the frequency, and the gain. And usually you have several different bands, so several different points that you can set to really shape the sound the way you want. Most of the time, you're not gonna find bass equipment or bass gear with that kind of EQ. They're usually made for mixing consoles, for live sound, or for recording studios, or also for plugins. I think the only product I know that has that kind of EQ for bass or for guitar is the Empress Para EQ. They allow you to set 3 different types of bell or 3 different types of Q, and also several different frequencies and the gain. But most of the time you're not gonna find that on bass equipment. Then there's the graphic EQ. And this one is definitely a lot more common to bass related products. How much control you have depends on the amount of frequencies or bands given to you by the manufacturer. Because on a graphic EQ, you can only raise or lower the volume of a particular frequency. And on bass products, the amount of bands or frequencies available ranges from like 4 to 6 bands. So you have like bass, low mids, mids, high mids, and treble. But it can be a lot more, like from 4 to 6 or 15, depending on the product. And lastly, we have the Semiparametric EQ, which is what you find on most bass amplifiers. And for example, if you see bass, mid, and treble, that is a Semiparametric EQ. You only have control over the gain of each one of those frequencies. So you can only raise the bass or lower the bass, raise the treble or lower the treble. You can't change the frequency or you can't change the Q. However, some products give you a little bit more control on the frequencies by either a knob or a switch that allows you to change the center point of a particular boost or cut that you're going to be doing. For example, my Mesa Boogie WD800 has a 3-band semiparametric mid section, which allows you to change the frequency range of the mid section. It's divided on low mids, kind of mid mids, and high mids, and then you can adjust the gain of that frequency. Some other products like the Darkglass Ultra series have a switch to allow you to change the center point of a frequency. Now, there are also different shapes of EQ. Most manufacturers use for the bass and treble what's called a shelving style EQ. And that means that frequencies above or below a certain point are going to be raised or lowered. And it looks kind of like a slope. And for the mid-range, you usually find a bell or peaking style EQ. And lastly, we have what's called a high-pass filter and low-pass filter. A high-pass filter is also called a low-cut or rumble filter because it removes frequencies below a certain point. So it's used to remove unwanted bass frequencies. A low-pass filter, also called a high-cut, is used to remove unwanted treble frequencies because it removes frequencies above a certain point. Now, what's interesting is that our bass cabinets act as high-pass and low-pass filters because they don't reproduce the whole frequency spectrum. They don't cover from 20 to 20,000 hertz. In most modern bass cabinets, you're gonna get a frequency response of like 50 hertz up until like 10K. If you have a tweeter, it might go higher. And in old school cabinets, it might be from 70 hertz up until, 5K. So you don't have that big of a sound spectrum coming out of the bass cab. You're not gonna hear all the upper treble frequencies or all the rumble that you could be hearing from a DI signal. So if you're wondering why your DI signal sounds so harsh or so different than what you hear of your bass cab, it is because you're hearing all those frequencies that are not being reproduced out of the bass cabinet. And that is when things like cabinet simulators or filters, high pass and low pass filters that you can put in your signal come into play. This is gonna be it for today. For the next episode, we're gonna be covering how each frequency affects the sound of the bass. Thank you guys for watching. Let me know what you think in the comments, and I'll catch you guys on the next one. Take care.